Hello and welcome to our TNT webinar this evening. So a massive welcome back to our regulars, and we've got a lot of newcomers this evening. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. So what we're going to look at tonight is we've got Justin and Karen, who are going to talk to us and talk through the 4 pillars of parental engagement.
So if you've not joined us before, myself and Avril started the webinars just in lockdown a couple of years ago, just as a way of giving back to teachers and trying to share and pass on as much information to try and help people in schools and promote helping the kids out there to improve. We don't get any financial gain, we just do it because we love it and we like to spread the word of teaching and making things better. So hopefully you'll find it useful tonight. And we're joined with some amazing presenters tonight, Justin and Karen. So we have 2 ways of communicating this evening. There is a Q&A function. So if you do want to ask a question, then just pop it in the Q&A section at the end. If we've got some time, we'll pose those questions to Justin and Karen. And there's also a chat function, which some of you are using already. So please say hello. We've already got some people from far and wide across the world tonight, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you. If you want to share some ideas of stuff you do in your school while we're going through the webinar, then please do that and talk to each other. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Justin, who's going to start the presentation. So over to you, Justin. I will just allow you to be able to control. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Hi, everyone. And I love that intro music that you guys were listening to for a few minutes there. And looking on the chat, you really are an international audience, and it's great to have so many of you from around the world listening to this absolutely critical topic tonight. I say tonight, it's morning for some of you looking at where you are around the world. So we're talking to you about empowering schools to connect with parents. I guess the maybe not so good news is it's not rocket science, or at least it doesn't have to be rocket science. It's not complicated, but then it's also an absolutely critically important area right now. So, Gary, where do I change the slide? There you go, it works. So, if you look at the quote on the screen, the comment on the screen, this is taken from research that ENFA, an organisation based here in the UK, did last year. Teachers estimated that on average pupils are 3 months behind in their learning due to COVID-19. So those of you that are online tonight and work in schools, I'm sure you've seen and felt the impact of some of this in your schools over the last months. However, a book released by a gentleman in 2008 called John Hattie, and some of you may have seen it, said that the effect of parental engagement over a student's school career is equivalent to adding 2 or 3 years to that student's education. So from my perspective, the key to closing that gap, or one of the keys to closing that gap, is parental engagement. It's one of the things that schools can do without spending a huge amount of money, but that can make a huge difference. So that's what we're talking to you guys about for the next 50 or so minutes. Before we do, we just wanted to introduce ourselves to you and explain why we feel that we can talk to you about this subject. Both Karen and myself, our background is in communication. We've worked with organisations around the world, actually, around communication, around change. Yeah, you can carry on, Gary, if you wanted to move it on. Around communication, around change, and around really involving people and getting people involved. And about 6 years or so ago, when my children were still at school, Karen's son at school, we had a conversation around school communication. And as communication professionals, we felt we just felt that there was a missed opportunity to really engage us in supporting our children at school. So rather than just sit and complain about it, what we did was we did some research. We spoke to other parents, we spoke to schools, and we started to develop our thinking around what we saw from the corporate world around communication and engagement with the school requirements and the demands that we were seeing and that we had as parents. And we started to develop models that we thought might be useful for schools. As a result of that, we started to work with a few schools here in the UK and beyond. And as you can see, some of them are on the screen now. And we've just started to really to get our message out there with regards to how schools can make such a difference through communication and engagement. We released a book in 2017, which was a general book around communication, which included some of our initial thoughts and theories. And then this book, our second book, The 4 Pillars of Parental Engagement, which is a book that this is what we're talking to you about now, tonight, this evening, was released in August this year, so only very recently. And this is, if you like, this is the culmination of our vision of what we wanted to achieve as parents with a communication and engagement background who literally just wanted to make a difference for the future of education by sharing some of what we knew and what we saw and hoping that it could make a difference.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Justin. Apologies, I've had to turn off my camera and I hope you can hear me okay. Unfortunately, I've got a few technical problems, as we all do very often at the moment. So tonight, this evening, whatever time of day it is for you, we are going to talk a little around why this partnership with parents really matters. Justin's touched on it very briefly, but we're going to talk a little more about that. We're going to help you to consider where you and your school is at the moment in terms of parental engagement. And then we're going to look at how do you understand where you want to be as well. It needs to be a conscious decision in terms of where you want to be and the type of relationship you want to have with parents. And of course, we'll touch briefly on how you're going to get there. And bearing in mind, this is from a book of a certain size, which took us quite a long time to write. And we only have a few minutes tonight to give you some highlights. But we hope at least it starts you thinking in slightly different ways around the opportunity to really move your school forward in terms of parental engagement. Thank you. So we'd like to ask you a quick question. So be poised to type into the chat. We would like to know what you think is important about connecting with parents. So what is important to you about connecting with parents? And if you could share your thoughts in the chat, please.
And Karen, while they're doing that, I've just seen a comment here from Ross Stevenson, who said, in my last school, which was in Madrid, it was heavily discouraged to communicate with parents, which was frustrating. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of examples and ways we can engage positively. Yeah.
So we've got be prompt and make them feel valued. They know the child best, work together for best outcomes. So true, that one. I think it's important to communicate for praise, absolutely, not just when you need to say when something's gone wrong. Understanding home life and how it can impact on a pupil's education. So parents have an understanding of what the expectations are. To be on their wavelength, excellent point. Parents have often had poor school experiences, and we definitely identified that through our research. Triangulate, absolutely, that it's called the golden triangle in terms of that relationship. Parents empowered to support, building self-esteem and positivity about school, know the whole child, make them aware that child's education is a shared responsibility. Some really excellent comments. Getting parents involved in their students' education. The transition, absolutely, to year 7 is really critical. Class dojo used by somebody here, I think Kirsty, where we can send messages to parents. Today I sent praise directly to parents and they were able to respond in time. It was that two-way relationship, which is so important. So thank you, Kirsty, for highlighting that. Yes, Heather, you've also said communication is a two-way street. Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Thank you for your thoughts in terms of what connecting with parents, what's important about it to you. Some really great comments. If we can move on to the next slide. So we've just summarised some of the points, which you've covered a number of them already, but in terms of why this partnership matters. So it improves academic achievement. Of course, there is research that demonstrates that. We can find that. We absolutely know it does. The second point is that pupils believe that school is important. Now, if they can see that their parents are taking school seriously, so they have this relationship with school and parents have that sort of belief in what the school is offering, they can then reinforce that with their children, and that will help children to believe that school is more important. They will also, the next point, teachers can obviously build strong relationships with parents, and that's fairly obvious that better relationships obviously mean more understanding and less conflict. But when you build trust over time, if things do go wrong, then it actually makes it a lot easier to sort things out as well. Parents will also become advocates for your school, so they'll talk positively to other people about your school because they will feel valued and they will feel that the school cares about their children. And finally, pupils will have a support network to develop and learn. So beyond the academic achievement, this is about having a support network of people, of school, of parents or carers around them who can help them to really develop in many, many ways. So that was our summary. There's obviously more in the book about that. So the next question we would like to ask you is, thank you, what challenges do you face in building strong relationships with parents? Obviously, if this was easy, I know Justin said it's not rocket science, and we believe it doesn't have to be rocket science, but we know that it's also tricky to get things right. There are many, many challenges. I was about to try and say some of them then. So we'd love to know what you think are the challenges that you face in building those strong relationships. So I can see some starting coming in. Do you want to
just to say, while you do that, I had a nice comment from Carmen. I think it's Carmis is how you pronounce it. It said, sorry, bad connection, but informative session. So thank you for that positive feedback.
I feel your pain on the bad connection. So their own experience of school, absolutely. Busy home life, language barrier, disaffected parents, time, huge barrier, isn't it? Language barrier, time to send personalised and written and relevant written communication. We've got parents' own experience of school again there. Parents who are not willing to engage, school-phobic parents, yes. Time after school to make connections, time to give everyone the time they deserve. Again, time's a major feature here. School is in a disadvantaged area. Parents didn't like school when they were growing up. Again, we've got this reinforcement of what school stands for parents as well. Sometimes communication is weighted towards negatives more than positives. That parents don't necessarily want to attend parents' evening, particularly from their phone. And work commitments, the parents who might have learning difficulties. So there's multiple reasons you've highlighted there, which are the realities of really what gets in the way. Just continued bad experiences again, lack of understanding of why the relationship is so important. Fully agree, great points. So we have summarised some of what you have said in a few points. And Gary, this goes up the mountain. There's a few points on here. So our first point on here is too many priorities. You said it, time, but energy as well. You only have so much energy for so many things in your school. You have multiple priorities. So, this might seem like one too many priorities at times. And the next one, resources, knowledge and training. Obviously, it would be fantastic if we were all absolute experts in communication, for example, all absolute experts in how to break down barriers when parents have had a bad experience, but we don't always have those resources, that knowledge and that training to be able to build those relationships in a planned and sustained way. And the next point, Gary? Language and cultural difficulties. People have already mentioned this to some degree in terms of language, but of course there's also cultural elements as well that can get in the way. And finally, consistency of approach over time. This one wasn't mentioned, and it's not a surprise it wasn't mentioned, but very much our book focuses on recognizing that relationships are built over time. They're built through trust, and trust is built through consistent experiences pretty much most of the time, because we know that there's, you can't get it right all the time. So consistency of approach over time is really fundamental. So many schools might say, well, we want to improve parental engagement, so we're going to have a few extra events, or we're going to have a new initiative, but it needs to be for the long term, and it needs to be with a long-term view of the relationship you want to have with parents as well. So Justin, over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And I love this slide. So I'm sure now you're probably starting to think about some of the things that we've talked about, and you can't wait to get back to school, or to start your day at school if you're just about to start, and jump straight in. Now, as I said at the beginning, it's not a huge secret, but what it does require is consistency. And in order to be consistent, you need to be planned. And in order to be planned, you need to know where you're going to. But in order to know where you're going to, you need to know where your starting point is. So it is a very simple process, but quite often it's one that gets overlooked, and schools will, based on what you've just said around time is such a precious commodity, will go straight to a solution to solve a problem. But quite often you might not be solving the problem that you think actually exists. So let me talk you through a little bit of understanding where you are now. It's really important that you don't make assumptions. And by that, what I mean is what you see inside the school gates. And when you see parents, whether you're at primary school, secondary school, or beyond, when you see parents, you're only seeing it from your perspective. It's very easy to make assumptions what it is like from their perspective. But unless you can put a mirror up for them and see what they see, you can't make any decisions based on what they see. Now, it can be really painful. Maybe I can't speak for having a bad hair day these days, but if I was having a bad hair day, I wouldn't want to look in the mirror because it's not a very nice sight. So similarly with communication, if things aren't going so well, you might even not want to know. But it's really important that you have that mirror, that you understand where you're starting from. And how you do that is you have a number of things at your fingertips that you can use. And again, in our experience, schools do make use of data. So, for example, we talk a lot about data. In my role as a chair of governors, we look at school data all of the time. But it's not always the right data, or we don't always interpret it in the right way. So when we look at things like how many pupils have left during the year, or how many pupils have joined this year versus last year, we don't dig any deeper than literally the headline data. We don't find out what's driven some of those changes, and what could have driven some of those changes could be as a result of parental engagement or disengagement. So it's really important to make use of all of the data. For example, if you look at parent events, and parent evenings was one of the things that was that I saw in the comments here around parents don't attend parent evenings. Are they not attending because they're opting out, or is it because there's another barrier? Are they at work, or are they just not able to get there? Or as has already been said, have they just had a really bad experience? So they need a little bit more support and to feel more confident coming into school. So it's digging beneath all of the obvious signs to understand what's behind some of the data that you'll see. Then you can look at things like online research. And again, it's looking beyond what people might say positively about your school in the places where you would normally look, or in the media. Use other things. Google your school online, search and find out what's being said, maybe in some of the places that you might not want to look. Those parent groups where parents are commenting about what it's like being having a child at the school. Sometimes they can really unearth some nuggets of information and things that you can really help to address if you understand what the root causes are. And then finally, and this is one that is really, really critical, and in the book we talk a lot about this, and this is really what this first step is all about. It's about listening. And your school team have a wealth of information. Your school team, teaching assistants, everybody involved in dealing with students, dealing with parents, they're in touch with those people every single day of the week. They have a wealth of information, so you should make use of it. Now, some schools will do school team surveys, but they feel quite formal and quite big and difficult. So again, and expensive they can be, but they don't have to be complicated or big or expensive. You can just have conversations. Your school leadership team, for example, could just have an informal conversation with the school teachers or the school teams that within their area. Just understand what are some of the challenges that you see with parents. You can bring all of that together and just see if there are common themes across the school, or are they confined to different classes or different areas. You can invite parents in. So again, we have helped schools with regards to parent surveys in the past, but it doesn't have to be so complex. You can invite parents in, you can have coffee type events, or formal or informal drop-ins, or even focus groups. We've done some focus groups with parents of schools that have been really, really enlightening, and the school has found out lots of nuggets of things that they just would never have known had they not sat and listened to parents when they've actually asked them. And what's really interesting, or surprising almost, is parents are not normally afraid to say how they feel. It's just quite often they'll do it on Facebook or places that you don't always want them to. Whereas if you give them that open opportunity to feed back in a safer environment where you can hear what they're saying and then let them know that you'll take it on board and you'll take actions on the back of it, it's a very, very different conversation. Okay, so we have a poll for you now, and Gary, can you run the poll, or do I need to run it from here?
No, it's fine, I can do it.
So the poll question you'll see is, how often do you formally listen to parents as a school? So if you can just do your vote. So is it every day, weekly, monthly, termly, annually, or never? And we say formally because we mean in a more structured way. You make it a deliberate act to listen to parents as a school.
So I think we've got 50% of people have voted so far, which is good. It's climbing. Okay. Let's try and get up to 100%.
Yeah, we've got 72 online, so let's see if we can get all of them. Are we there yet, Gary?
We're on about 80%. So we'll give it another 10 seconds, then we'll share the poll. It's quite a mix, but there is one clear, well, not clear, one, but it's just changed now. Just I was saying that. Right, here we go.
That's the commentator's curse, that is, Gary, isn't it?
No. Right, here we go. These are the results.
Termly and annually. Okay, yeah. So I think it's great that you've all said that, or most of you have said. I think we've got 4% that said never. That most of you have said there's a level of listening to parents as a school. I think for the termly and annually, some of the things that I've just talked about, maybe sort of some things that you can just think about. How might you think about putting a bit more informal learning in place, so you get more of a pulse check rather than a formalized once a term or once a year checkpoint? Well, that's great. Thank you for your feedback. So if we can close that, Gary, and I'll hand over to Karen.
Thank you, Justin. So you thought about where you are in terms of what Justin was talking about, but then of course you need to think about where do you want to be. So it's important to consider what you want to achieve through your relationships with parents. In other words, what does active parental engagement mean for your school? How will these relationships help you to achieve your school business plan and ensure pupils are parents as well, but pupils are at their best? So as Gary has, or Justin has revealed, we would say we absolutely recommend that you focus on what you want pupils to achieve. This sounds really obvious, but it might be slightly different things at different times. For example, of course, you want parents to support in terms of pupils' learning. So of course you want to focus on what you want pupils to achieve in terms of learning, but it might be also related to well-being as well. It might be related to additional development areas. So there might be different elements of what you want to focus on in terms of pupils. You also might want to consider what challenges you face as a school and as a local community that are influenced by parents. So an example of that could be behaviour, for example. So that might be another aspect you want to consider in terms of this. Also, on the next point, if you understand what is and is not working for each of parents, pupils and the school team. So again, going back to the listening that Justin was talking about, having done that, you should be able to identify what it is and isn't working for those three groups. And that will also help you to think about where do you want to be in relation to those different parts. And of course, with all of this in mind, you then need to think about what would active parental engagement look and feel like from your school. So you were getting too comfortable, so we'll get you to interact again. We've got another question. So thinking about what I've just talked about, what would active parental engagement look like at your school? So this is what you would like it to look like. You could share, yeah?
Sorry, I was just about to say there's a question from Rebecca saying, will we get sent a copy of the recording? Gary, the recording will be available on YouTube.
Yeah, so everyone who's registered, we will send an email in the next few days with the recording on it, and we'll also put it on our YouTube channel, which we'll share with you at the end, a couple of days' time as well.
Thank you. So parents attending parents' evenings, that would be a good start, wouldn't it? Absolutely. Teachers feeling happy when parents' evening comes up. That sounds a great target. I like that one. Parents attending parents' evening again to discuss children's progress. Happy, positive parents, again, wonderful. Parents' teachers' evening, again, these are really featuring. Assemblies, show and tell, reading afternoons, art afternoons for parents. Parents supporting learning at home, that's a great one. Signing homework diaries. There's quite a few sort of actions that I can see popping in. I think it's also thinking about longer term, what's that sort of relationship you want with parents as well. Two-way communication with the school to support the whole child, supporting behaviour, absolutely. All parties proud to attend the school, love that. Parents comfortable to share concerns, again, great. Parents being less defensive when offering support, fantastic. Filling in questionnaires, parents and schools working together and building a learning community, parents being honest with us no matter what the issue. Yeah, absolutely, that trust that you have built up, which obviously takes time so that parents can really say it as it is and support you in what you're trying to achieve. Parents saying good things about the school and the community, absolutely. So that was that advocacy point that we were talking about. You really want them to be supporting you in the local community. Parents engaging with school communication, absolutely, and working with us to improve the school environment. Some great points there, really great. Justin, it's back to you.
Thank you, Karen. So now we move on to the million-dollar question. How are you going to get there? So based on your understanding of where you are now, and then where you want to be, you will have started to think about or started to visualize how might you get to your destination. Now in the book, we talk about the 4 pillars And the 4 pillars are how we categorize those actions that you will take in order to move your school to that destination. And some of the comments that you've just shared in the chat fall quite nicely into the first pillar that we'll talk to you about now. I'll move the slide on. The first of the 4 pillars, which is around knowledge. And this is a really simple one, but also and simple and so obvious that almost there's a level of assumption, I think, which is what I said before, that means that there is not action taken on it. But does everyone, whether that's parents, whether it's people within school, or even the pupils themselves, does everyone understand why it's so important that parental engagement matters, or why parental engagement matters? Do they understand what difference it can make? It's really, really simple. There are lots of other knowledge things that we'll cover a little bit of here and now, but as Karen said, we can't go into all of them right now. But the most basic one is, do people know why parental engagement is such a big topic? The next one then comes around to the environment, and we don't mean the trees and the outdoor environment necessarily. What we mean here, we talk about 3 environments that school has, that the school can have an impact on, and they're all really critical in terms of managing that parental relationship, that parent-student-school relationship. So first of all, it's your school environment. And again, we'll talk a little bit about this, but you want a school environment that feels parent-friendly. But you also want an online environment where parents don't get lost, where they can find things, they feel supported. But then also the home environment. If the home environment doesn't support the school environment and the online environment, then when students are at home, I think it's in a completely different world. And I saw a comment in here that said parents see that home and school are completely separate. So again, it comes back to that environment point. Then the third pillar that we talk about is culture. And again, there's a lot of comments around community and parents saying good things about the school in the community. It's important for you as a school, when you're developing your destination, you need clarity around what sort of school culture do you want. And there's no right or wrong culture to have. Some schools have a much more collegiate culture, some might be more competitive. It's very much depends on your school, your vision, and what your school stands for. But when you're very clear on your culture, that culture needs to be lived, it needs to be shared, it needs to be respected, and also that culture needs to feel like it's one that everybody can trust, and needs to create trust with everybody that's involved in the school, so with parents and with pupils. And again, there are simple things that schools can do and quite often don't do that help to break down that trust and not create the right culture that you're looking for. And then the final pillar, probably not surprisingly, is around communication. Now, there's a statistic that we often quote, which is that 85% of our success as humans on this planet is as a result of how well we can communicate. So just think about that for a moment. 85%. It's huge. And yet most schools in our experience don't train their teachers or those that deal with parents in communication. It's not generally a fundamental part of teacher training. And yet, as some of you have said, parent evenings are something that you dread rather than look forward to. So communication in terms of how you deal with other people is absolutely critical. But also it's about communication is not just what you as a school tell other people, it's how you listen. It's how you make sure that information is shared in a way that doesn't overload parents or pupils, or also your colleagues, because communication happens within the school as well. And it's important that a school looks at communication as a holistic piece between parents, between the school and between pupils, not individually, because that's how overload can happen quite easily, actually. So what we'll do now is just dive a little bit into the 4 pillars. But before we do, we've just got another quick poll for you, Gary, which is based on what we've said, and I hope you've got a level of understanding of what we mean by the 4 pillars, so knowledge, environment, culture and communication. Which one do you think is the most important for your school right now? If you can vote, and hopefully we can get as near to 100% as we can.
Yeah, I think we're nearly up to 50%. People voted. This is brilliant. Again, quite interesting. I don't want to curse it again. There's one that's coming across at the moment is quite important.
I think we might guess which one it is, Gary.
Yeah, well, before I reveal, I'll you can have a guess, both of you.
Yeah. When he gets to the end. Not going to say it yet. It might skew it a little.
So let's give it another 10 seconds. Right, go on then. What are you guessing?
It must be the last one.
Communication, yes.
And let's have a look. I feel like I'm one of them game shows where we reveal. Here we go. There you go.
Yay!
Yeah. It's not surprising, and you know, I think as I said, 85% of our success is as a result of how we communicate. It's a huge topic and it's a huge area, and it's what got us into doing what we do today. So hopefully we can help you guys a little bit or will have helped and continue to help as we go through. So Karen, over to you.
Thank you very much. So we wanted to share some examples of actions you may want to take in each area, which have been taken from the book. For knowledge, you will want to communicate regularly with parents about why their support is so critical and how they can support, of course. The second point is that you will want to be clear with them regarding minimum actions. And so what do we mean by this? Often we want to suggest or even tell parents what we need them to do to support their child's education. But sometimes there are more critical things that they need to do than others. So consider, what are those really critical actions that parents need to take? And obviously, if they can take anything beyond that, then that's great. But make those critical actions really clear so they don't feel overwhelmed by what they need to do. And on the last point, you may want to recruit ex-parents or even parents who are later on in the school who can actually guide some of the newer parents so they can have a much better experience learning from what those other parents have learned as they've gone through the school as well. These parents would really be your advocates, of course. So moving on to the next slide, we look at environment. So environment, we need to make sure that your school is parent friendly, and Justin mentioned this briefly earlier. So for example, is there appropriate signage for them to find their way easily around your school? And you might even want to ask somebody who hasn't been to your school before, who's a friendly person that you can actually walk around with and ask them, what do you think about this? How do you feel about this? You know, literally walk around with them and get a sense of what people might feel as they're walking around, because that really is going to influence that parent experience. On the second point, you will also want to obviously make sure that the first people that parents see at reception often will be friendly, welcoming, the type of first impression that you really want to give. And finally, obviously you want it to be an inclusive environment for different parents, and this could be parents with specific needs. It could be parents who are from different cultures, from different countries. I'm sure many of you have been, or you may have in your own schools, a welcome sign in different languages that is reflective of your local community, and it's small things like this that really do make a difference. Justin, over to you.
Thank you, Karen. So moving on to the third pillar, which is culture. So as I said, do you know what kind of culture you want at your school? This is a really fundamental point, and it's one that we can't overly stress, because the culture supports the vision of your school. So having that clear vision supported by a clear culture helps you to be consistent throughout your school in all of the dealings that you have with parents. But then it's about focusing on building trusted relationships with parents. And there's nothing worse for a parent who's had maybe a bad experience of school to not feel that they've got that trusted relationship when they need to come into school or to deal with the school. So it's about making sure that you do what you say you will do and keeping your promises. It's about making sure that you, when you're dealing with parents, if you say you'll do something at a certain time, you do it at a certain time. All of the little things that help to build trust. Things that from inside the school, you might not really think they make much of a difference, but from a parent's perspective who might be terrified or had a bad experience of school, they can really break down those trusted relationships that you're trying to build. And then finally, and this is something that we talk a lot about in the book, which there's been a lot of research done around it, the benefit of involving parents and pupils together. There's been some research, as I said, in terms of a program called FAST, Families and Schools Together. And what they found was that the impact, the long-term impact of having parents and pupils learning together not only helped to embed their learning, but also helped to improve the level of relationships that parents had with pupils, and that consequently those parent and pupil units had with the school. So it's really, really critical if you can think about creative ways that you can involve parents with pupils. Quite often you might bring parents in to have a lesson about something that you think they might learn from, or you give students an extra piece, but think about, can you actually do something together? Or even, could you empower pupils to teach, or almost to work with their parents at home, out of school, thinking about the environment, but how they can really start to bring some of that learning to parents at home as well as in school. And then finally, the top of the pops one on the poll, communication, which really is, I think, a big challenge for all schools, as we said earlier. And the first point is one that we touched on already, around communication training. And there are lots and lots and lots of different levels of communication training that you can offer. Some of them are skills based, some of them are slightly different in terms of personality, psychology based. It's whatever you go for, it's important that school team members feel confident when dealing with parents, and that they're able to listen effectively to parents. It's the first step in building that really trusted relationship. The next step is very much around listening. Now, listening at a parent evening is fine because you're having a two-way conversation. You'll ask a parent, and again, sometimes in our experience, schools don't really listen to what parents have to say there. But beyond that face-to-face interaction, it's about other ways of listening. So at the start, I talked about doing the informal surveys, but it's also when you communicate with parents, when you send them a message, or through your website, or using the school app, or whatever method it is that you use to communicate with them, make sure that there's a way for them to share back with you. If you make it very one way, it's very clear that you're just broadcasting information to them. You're not really interested in listening to what they have to say. So whether it's, say, if you have any feedback, send us an email to this address, or having slightly more advanced feedback mechanisms, it's entirely up to you as a school, but make sure that you have that listening element to all the communications that you do. And then finally, and this is one that we think it carries an awful lot of weight, but again, schools just don't tend to do this kind of thing, is recognise parents for doing a great job. There was one earlier actually on Class Dojo around recognising recognising a student to a parent, and that parent will have felt great that their child did great in class, but actually do the same for parents. Maybe even whether it doesn't have to be a Class Dojo, but whether it's an email or a phone call, or just something that literally takes 30 seconds, a phone call to say your son or daughter had a great lesson today, thank you for your support, is much better than a conversation where you have to make a complaint to a parent. So it's really, really critically important that you can think about how can you recognise parents and show that you really value the support that they give to their children in what you're all working together towards, which is to improve the outcomes of children at school.
So I know that I think, Gary, you were suggesting at the start that people shared great examples of parental engagement, great parental engagement that they've seen. And obviously, if you could carry on doing that as we go through the next few minutes, where we're going to have some time for some questions. I can see, Rebecca, you've got a question already, so we'll pick up on that one. But I think it's great you're all on the call together, and if we could share some of those great examples, that would be really fantastic for everybody's benefit, because you'll all have tried different things, done different things, and had different experiences. Shall I just pick up quickly, Gary, on Rebecca's question, because I know what it relates to, because I was sort of tracking it, because you might not know what it related to otherwise.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that was exactly it, Rebecca. Thank you. Parent and child involvement. So when you were talking, Justin, about involving parents and pupils together, Rebecca was just asking if we had any specific ideas to support involving parents and pupils together. And I was just going to mention, and although it's a primary school example, I think it could be extended from a secondary school as well. Yeah, parent workshops, actually, I think you just had that come in. That's a good example. Fleet Primary School is one that some of you may know. They appeared on Britain's Got Talent, and they have done a lot in terms of actually putting the school at the heart of the community. So it's a great example of how they've actually brought all the parents and the pupils together as a community. So it doesn't have to necessarily just be on a sort of a pupil and parent together with the school individually type thing. It can also be how you bring people together as part of a community. So I thought that was just a great example. It is in the book. There's a case study. It talks more about it, but it's very much about outreach into the community. It's about bringing parents and pupils into the school for events and other things that they do.
Parent cafes, coffee mornings, some great examples coming through, Carol, I can see.
Absolutely. Arts in the park, that sounds great. I'd like to do
that. So we have got about 10 minutes left or so, and so I'm just about to hand back over to Gary to do his bit and the competition, and we can take questions. But just before we do, we've mentioned the book a lot. So if you can see the screen now, there's a QR code on there. If you scan that, that will take you to the publisher's page, publisher's website, where you can purchase a copy of the book. And you can get a 30% off. You can get 30% off with the discount code 4pillars30 until the 12th of October. So if you're interested, you can get in touch with us on the details that are on screen, or if you're interested in any of the other things that we do in terms of masterclasses or personal communication, or even school accreditation or personal coaching, then please pop over to our website, fit2communicate.com/register-interest, and you can leave your details, and we will keep you updated on anything that we're doing and when new items are released. But I think with that, Gary, I'll hand back over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Justin and Karen. They've got some really good ideas that I'm going to be looking into myself, so thank you very much for that. Be really interested in having a read of your book as well. So a massive thank you to both Justin and Karen. Obviously, if you want to get in touch, you've got the Twitters on screen there. And a huge, massive thank you to Elementary Technology for helping us out with being able to use their platform and use the technology to help us to deliver these sessions completely free of charge to everybody. We really do appreciate it. And also for all the support and recommendations from Crown House Publishing as well. So we're really grateful to everybody who helps us with these webinars.
You're on mute, Gary.
Yeah, on your mute.
There we go. Classic mistake. Just as well, saying on the webinar stuff, one of the things that sort of struck a chord with me was the training for teachers. You know, I've been teaching 13-14 years now, and I've never done a CPD or inset on how to communicate with parents. You know, I've seen it in, you know, so many examples of new teachers, or when I was a young teacher, you know, doing that first phone call home or the parents' evening. You know, you might practice it once or something in your training, but no one really tells you how to actually, what to say, how to use psychology, those kind of things. So that's one thing that I will massively take away from this. So thank you for that, guys, for sharing that. So we always do, if you've not been to one of our webinars before, we always do some competitions for you guys to win some stuff. And these are some of the winners from our last one, which we did on middle leadership mastery with Adam Robbins, not a relation of Justin, by the way. And these were some of the prizes we gave away and some of the winners. I think Rebecca was the one who asked the question, I think. Rebecca won a mug. We got ice cream maker, some really nice treats there from Finch Baker, and then we gave away some books as well. On to the competitions this time. Over to you, Avril.
So this time on this webinar, we've got two lots of £25 Amazon credit. So if you win, you can buy something off there. And we've got two teacher TNT, the coveted TNT mugs that are in high demand. And also we've got 2 copies of the book that's been promoting this evening, the 4 Pillars of Parental Engagement. So you've got an opportunity to win yourself a free one. And then an absolutely fantastic prize. You could also win an hour's free consultation with Justin and Karen. So I think that's an absolutely amazing prize. So thank you very much for those prizes, Justin and Karen. Really appreciate them.
You're welcome.
And what we will do is towards the end, remind me, Avril, because I always forget, I will copy and paste that link into the chat so you can fill in the feedback form. So in order to be entered into the prizes, you've got to fill in the feedback form. It should only take you a couple of minutes. It's dead quick. And we'll close the competitions on Friday the 22nd. So you've got 2 weeks, and then we normally announce them on our social media the week after. So if you've never joined us before, or you've not followed us on in the social media, we've got a Facebook group, we have a Twitter, and we've got, most importantly, is our YouTube channel. And I think this is like the 11th, 12th webinar that we've done so far, and this range of different things from teaching and learning stuff to just general motivation of people. So check that out. And we do webinars pretty much nearly every month, or we try to do one every month with different topics. So if you want to keep updated on those, then please add us on social media and talk to us if you want to. And one thing which I wanted to promote as well, if you're in a secondary school, Tassamai, who have worked with us in the past and done some webinars on revision skills, they also produced this free GCSE survival guide, which is really good for parents. It talks them through things they can help the children with when they're revising for GCSEs. They've consulted mental health experts, revision experts. So there's really loads of good stuff in there. So you can just go to the website or just type in GCSE survival guide Tassamai on the website. You can download it for free. So I just thought I'd share that with everyone. And we have got about 5 minutes left. So if anyone's got any questions that they want to put in the Q&A now, we can put those to Justin and Karen. So let's just have a look. Can you see those, Justin? Do you want to reel them off?
Yeah, there's one I've seen in the chat that's gone through that said the big question I have is how do you focus engagement of pupil premium parents without them feeling stigmatized? Very good question. Karen, do you want to take that one, or shall I?
I'm happy to. So Justin and myself worked actually on the National School Breakfast Programme, and we worked a lot with schools that had children in some of the most deprived areas. And it was a big topic that came up a lot there. So we were trying to engage teenagers, actually secondary school pupils, to come in for a free breakfast, which you think should be easy, but of course it's not, because there are many other aspects at play, some of which is around stigma. And what we found was actually you really just need to focus on almost going where the energy is in any sort of group. So if you can get a few parents who are slightly more easily engaged, shall we say, but they start talking about some of the positive things that school is doing to get them in to support their children, they can start acting as the advocates and the outreach to the other parents. And it's very much using a bit of a behaviour change type approach, that we're often more influenced by the people we know around us in our local community than we are by, say, people we might see sort of in power, shall we say, whether that's a school or whatever. That's just a perception, of course, but that can be how it's perceived. The other thing that we found very, very, very helpful is actually helping the pupils to engage with their own parents. So taking things from a slightly different angle, and that can work as well. So there's a couple of ideas that hopefully might be useful, but Justin, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I mean, you've pretty much covered it, Karen. I was just going to say the one topic that I talked about a lot was listen. So I would always start with listening to them, ask them what their challenges are, and as Karen says, go where the energy is, but really just kind of understand what are the barriers. And again, we can make assumptions what the barriers are, but sometimes they might be very different to what we assume. So start with listening, go where the energy is, and yeah, and as I say, that's what I think that would be it. Thank you.
And just on that, Justin, one of the barriers, someone said, would you recommend getting key literature and information translated into different languages? And I know you can do that on Microsoft Word. You just go at the top, highlight it, and change it into a language for free, can't you? Is that a good idea to do?
Yeah, we would. We definitely advocate that. And again, there's obviously a cost involved, and it depends on what platforms and technology schools use. But certainly, key literature. It's important to make sure that parents feel that they've been treated as individuals, and so if they're reading something in a language that they don't understand, that doesn't feel very personal to them. So yeah, absolutely, definitely recommend that. But there are lots of things you can use these days that will auto translate, and whilst it's not 100% perfect, it's better than no translation at all.
Yeah.
Class Dojo, I can't see what say, Class Dojo as well. Chris just said obviously translates for you and things like that. So yeah.
And just another question, which is, I think for us, is a general one. Normally we do give certificates of attendance, so we make some certificates. So if you do want a certificate of attendance to use in your professional development record that you might have at school that you've attended, then if you just email us on that address at the bottom, tntteachingandlearning@gmail.com, we will get those out to you in the next week or so. Like I said, me and Avril do still work in education, so we'll try our best to get them out to you as soon as possible. Is there any more in the chat? Can anyone see any more in the chat? There's none in the Q&A.
There's a couple. Do you have any examples of letters sent to parents that don't stigmatize them to invite them in?
We don't as such. It would be more actually shaping that communication around whatever the particular thing you want to encourage them to do. So we wouldn't have sort of a set approach. It would be based on a particular situation and thinking about the particular people you're talking with. So that's why we wouldn't do more of a standard, sadly.
There are some templates in the book there to help with some of the things, not letters specifically, but just generally templates. There's another one around, do you do CPD sessions on parental engagement in schools? We can do, yes.
And I think that's it. We're perfect timing. It's now 8 o'clock. So thank you everyone for attending. I really appreciate you giving up your time, especially on at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night. Some of you may have been working at school till late. And just want to say thank you, Karen. Thank you, Justin, for giving up your time. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we can spread the word, get more schools in touch with their parents and working alongside parents. And hopefully that'll make a big difference. So thank you very much, guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll see you all soon. Thank you, Avril.
Thank you,
everybody. Bye.
Bye. See you later.